I'm live. I have a. So we are coming live from Dovertown Church of Christ. I'm going to wait. It is 5:54. We come on at 6 in 6 minutes. So I'm going to wait and let a few people get in here. I already have one. So let me move around and get a few things ready. If I disappear, just hang around. I am here, giving everybody a chance to get in. So, okay. Three. Hey, Rachel, how are you? I'm getting something ready here for our class. Turn here to the side, letting everybody come in. Have four. Again, we'll start in 4 minutes. We got Blayton, Angie, Lacey, Jennifer, and Tammy. Hey to everybody. Y'all, excuse me just a minute. I am working on something. Uh, what I'll do, I'll put in the description of here when we're actually starting, but we thought it would be good to start early and let Emily put a link to it, let everybody come in. And if you're here, you're seeing half of my face. Count yourself lucky, of course, because it gets ugly after this. Okay. Oh, Shonda is here. Rhonda is here. Okay, great, great, great. Hey, everybody. Somebody just texted. Well, let's see. Hmm. Okay. I'll turn my phone off. Drew is here. Drew, my buddy who helps me with this lesson in a very small way, he might think, but I think it's going to help me in the long run. We have 10 coming in. Hey, everybody. How's it going? W. Wade. Hey there, W. Wade. Auntie Cookie is here. Oh, I'm so glad. Disaster. Everybody telling each other, hey. Got 14 in and 1 minute to go. So good to have everybody. Hey, Wendy. Oh, Cookie saying, hey, Wendy. Okay. Hmm. Of course it's Wendy. Who else would have a smiling face like that? Love you, Auntie Cookie. Hope you get to feeling better. Awesome. Oh, love you, Drew. Well, it is 6 o'clock, so I'm going to start our class right now. And welcome. I've got two things that I want us to do today. The first thing is something you know me, I try things out. And if it doesn't work, well, then it just doesn't work. But I wanted to try it. I wanted to give it a try. And the second thing is either going to be my second part of the lesson, or if the first thing that I'm trying doesn't work, it'll be what we'll go to instead. I'm all for trying something out, and I'm also all for not. I'm not for staying with it, and I want to admit that it went wrong. So this is what I want to do. Now we finished our lesson in James. I want to share with you, and I want to try to share with the world something that is more precious to me than most of my earthly possessions. It's right up there with my Bible. It's right up there with, I don't know what else to compare it to, except just to say that what I want to share with you tonight is of the utmost uh, category of being special. I want to say first, thank you to everybody for coming. I have listed who I see chimed in on my live chat. I also want to, before we begin, give some shout outs. I want to give a shout out and say hello, howdy to Mary Lou Barker. I feel like you're watching. Uh, if you're not, I just spoke to nobody, but I think you're there watching me and glad to have you with us. The Williams family just came in. Darren, Shannon, and Malia are here. Glad to have them. I want us to remember Paul Hutch in our prayers. He, of course, had his brain surgery, is by himself, and he knows that the rest of the world is by themselves too. Let's remember Earl. We could go on and on and on. So, Mary Lou, you do not see the chat, I don't believe. But Cookie said, I, with a beautiful heart, with looks like it's in lights, lights, sparkles on it. I love you, Mary Lou. And so, want everybody to remember Mary Lou. Let's also remember Jerry and Dolores. Hopefully, they're going to get to come with us, them, and I believe Ray Greganis' family. Some of them, this live stream comes a little later than when we're getting it. I'm going to begin by sharing a tad of good news with everybody. Through the benevolence of an anonymous donor from another county, a person that I do not know, Dovertown was allowed to send out another issue, a free issue of our house to house, heart to heart paper. This issue is going to go out to tell the Dovertown Cordova communities to keep up our hope and where they can come and find us on our online worship services and Bible studies. This anonymous donor did not just donate this to Dovertown, but to, I believe I was told, congregations in 6 counties. Someone uh, did that for us and for several congregations of the Lord's church to let their congregations know, hey, we are here. God is with us. Here's how you can come and contact us, and here's where we are. So I don't know who this person is who did this. I was not told, but when we say our prayers, let's tell God thank you for them. You know, we think of wealthy people sometimes as stingy and selfish. And this may not even be a wealthy person. This may be someone who saved it up. Here was someone who had money and used their money for good for us. I want to say hello to Chastity and to Elizabeth and to whoever is with their families. I want to say hello to you all. So good to have good to have you with us. Okay, so here's what I wanted to try. Let me get back on where I was talking about. I want to show you something that I said earlier was among my most prized possessions. And this may or may not work in this platform. If it doesn't, then I'll try something else. But I have with me something that I grew up with, and some of you already know as a child. I want to share with us since we're through with our James lesson. I have here one of the Malpound scrolls. I thought we could do a lesson looking at one of these scrolls. Before I do it, I want to tell you a little bit about the history of this scroll and what they are. And why I said I don't know if I can do it or not. I don't know if I can get it all on the screen. We're going to try. And if it doesn't work, maybe I could do that in another way. But I wanted to share with the world what Malpounds my grandmother shared with Emily and with me. So let me tell you the history of these briefly before I go into the lesson that they contain. These scrolls were used at Indian Creek Youth Camp to teach Bible classes. They were primarily made to go to the younger crowd, but they were well done, so much so that the older people liked them, and she even did it with a teenage class one time. So these scrolls, while they do cover basic stories in the Bible, they also are at a level that people could get good from them. So what she would do is this. This is on Muslim cloth, and she took these strips of cloth, some of which I remember she got from my Aunt Rachel's store, that she would spend her winters drawing these scrolls, and then in the summer she would show them. So I'm going to try to take the oh, Tori's with us, and Patrick. Good. Hello, Tori, and hello, Patrick. I'm going to try to take these. I may have to move the camera down, and in this way, kind of Ma Pounds can be with us. But she would draw these scrolls, and she copied them from pictures that she saw. She would look at a picture and draw on it, and she she did as many stories in the Bible as she could through the winter, and when summertime came, she'd show them in her classes. I remember she was very particular about her scrolls. One time I went to her house when I was a child, and she was working on an Adam and Eve, and I don't think this is that Adam and Eve, but she was working on it, and she said, "You want to help me?" And I drew it, and I didn't like the way Eve's hair went behind her. I wanted it to fall over her shoulder, so I drew it over her shoulder, and I she said, "Oh, you made it not pretty." She went and fixed it. She didn't ask me again much to do help with her scrolls. She was particular about them, but what she ended up with was quite a work of art. Somebody said, "Pull it back where we can see them." So I'm going to pull it back, and I'm going to begin with this. This is the Genesis scroll, and it begins with the first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And what she would do as she told the story, she would roll the scroll, and there's the art to it. And I mean, there's an art to it. You roll the scroll as you narrate the scroll. And I will say this. Now, she was the one who brought these scrolls to life. I cannot do it like she did. But she began with the creation, and she would sing with the kids. Day one, God made light when there was none. And day two, God made heavens and skies of blue. And day three, on the third day of creation, God made the land and seas, plants and trees. I don't know if you can tell that. There we go. Get a little closer. Land and seas, plants and trees. Day four, sun and moon and stars galore. Day five, God made fowls and fish alive. Now, she changed the words a little in the next verse of that song. Instead of day six, she would say, sixth day, God made animals and man that day. Okay. Day seven, God has rested in his heaven. And so there's a very small piece where it said rested. So we go from the creation of the world to the people he put into the world. We have Adam being created, Adam first. And Adam's first job was to name the animals. And so we have these animals that Adam named. God saw that man was alone, and he made Adam fall asleep. And from his rib, he took his rib and closed the place thereof. And from his rib made Eve. This might or might not be the Eve that I drew the hair on and she went back and redid it. I don't know. But anyway, God made Eve. And it wasn't long before the serpent told Eve, well, let me go back. God told Adam and Eve, you can eat of any tree in the Garden of Eden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And Eve was by that tree, apparently, when the serpent said, did God say that you couldn't eat any of the trees of the garden? And Eve said, well, no, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he said not to eat, for in the day you eat thereof, you will surely die. The serpent said, you will not die. And instead, God knows that you will be made like God. And the day you eat of it, you'll be like God's, knowing the good and evil. She ate of it, and she gave it to Adam, who the Bible says was with her. And they got kicked out of that beautiful garden. God came and said, where are you? Adam said, I was naked, and you and was hid from you. Who told you you were naked? God said. Well, the woman you gave me the fruit, and he said, have you eaten the fruit? I'm sorry. He said, the woman you gave me of the fruit, and I did eat. What is this you have done? Eve said, the serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And so God cursed the serpent, God cursed the woman, God cursed the man. And I can hear Granny saying, look out there, look at these weeds. We don't see peas and okra and corn and things growing. The man has to work from the sweat of his face. And from then on, things were different. They were kicked out of the garden. There was a cherubim placed there with a flaming sword that did not allow man back into the garden. That garden, which had every tree that was good for sight, every tree that was good for food. And this garden was such a spectacular garden. And here's a map of the rivers that watered the garden: the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Pishon, the Gihon, that watered the garden. And they were out of that beautiful garden. So Adam and Eve had two sons, Cain, the oldest, and then there was Abel. Cain gave a sacrifice to God of the fruit of the ground, and Abel gave a sacrifice to God of the firstlings of his flock. God had respect to to Abel's sacrifice, but not to Cain's. And Cain did not like that. And so he killed his brother Abel went out in the field and rose up and killed him. God asked Cain, where is your brother? Cain said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? What is this you have done? His blood cries to me from the ground. God put a mark on Cain. He cursed him. And we have, from then on, Cain could not be any type of farmer. God gave them Seth, and Seth replaced Abel. But the ground would not yield for Cain, so Cain had to leave. And Cain built cities, and the descendants of Cain were inventors, and they made things like musical instruments and working with bronze and things like that. That was the lineage of Cain who did that. He built a city. The name of that city was Enoch. But the world got more and more wicked from the descendants of Cain. And even when some of the descendants of Cain and the descendants of Seth married into each other, that they populated the world, but the world became wicked. And this wickedness got so great that God decided he was going to destroy the world. During this time, we have people living to be great ages, the oldest listing of which is Methuselah at 969 years. We have Adam living to be 950 years. These men lived these long years and populated the world during their long lifespans. But the world got so wicked that, well, we do have Enoch, uh, who was very wise. This was not the Enoch that uh, Cain built the city. And we have the story that what happened with Noah. God told Noah to build an ark. I remember in her classes, small pounds would sing a song about God told Noah to build him an arky arky. Some of you can uh, do that. And Cookie brought up something I was fixing to say. She used a child to help. And this is true. Especially when her arms got bad, she would get a child on one end and a child on the other, and they would roll it as she would tell it. But this is the story of Noah and the ark. The animals you see here coming out of the ark, actually, two by two. And in some of her scrolls, she had more details on the flood. But we go over the dimensions of the ark: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. And we did this. We went through, and here after the ark, when God put a rainbow to promise he'd never again destroy the world by water. We know next time it'll be fire, but God told them to spread out. They didn't spread out. Instead, they got together and they built the Tower of Babel, called that because instead of spreading out, they decided to make a name for themselves and built a tower up in the heavens. And God confused their languages and they spread out and went to different parts of the earth. So, after that, we come to the family of Abraham. Later, his name was changed to Abraham. Abram, Sarai. God told Abram to move. Now, let me tell you something. I can barely see through this, so I can see almost what's in the screen here. He told Abram to move, get out from your place, get out from your kindred, get out from your country, and to a place that I will show you. And so Abram did, and his nephew Lot went with him, and they went from where he lived in Ur of the Chaldees to a place that God would show him. His wife Sarai was beautiful, and she went with him too. So later on, we see God promising to Abraham that he would make a great nation out of him, and promising that through his name all nations would be blessed. So here is a map of that promised land that God made, or God promised to Abram. The Palestine area here, Holy Land area, where you have the Sea of Galilee flowing through the Jordan River on down into the Dead Sea. And I remember her talking about the Dead Sea was so uh, dense you could float on it and read a newspaper. And I have seen pictures of that since. I remember that was one of the things I Googled when I first got on the internet. Was that really true? And yes, it was true. You could do that. So this land was a beautiful land. And this is Abraham and Lot. The land was good, but it could not hold all of their flocks. He had not come into the land promised yet, but Abram and Lot's herdsmen quarreled with each other over things such as water and food to eat. And so Abram told Lot, "You go one way and I'll go the other." Lot went toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abram turned and went the opposite direction so they could split up. Their herds and all were so large. Abram was a very wealthy man. Actually, so was Lot. And here we have Abraham. Here we have him pleading for the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm trying to read this. Uh, read this. I told you wrong. This is not him pleading. This is God promising him a son. It looks like he's pleading, but God did promise him a son. And God promised him a son, and we know that son later was Isaac. He got Ishmael first, but he got Isaac. And here we have Abraham and Sarah. And I have to look this way to see Abraham and Sarah receiving this promise, and Sarah thinking it was funny. And she laughed, but it did happen. The angels came to them and told them that this would be. The angels had to go to Sodom and Gomorrah to look at it for its destruction. Then was when Abraham tried to talk God into not destroying the city, talked him all the way from 50 down to 10, that if God could find 10 good people, he would not destroy this city. So that didn't happen, and the city was destroyed. But this is Abraham and Isaac. God told Abraham, "Go and sacrifice your son to me that I have given you." He gave him a son named Isaac, and Abraham went and he did attempt to sacrifice. And Isaac asked him, "Where is the sacrifice?" Abraham said, "God will provide." Abraham started to, but an angel stopped his sword, and he looked in the bushes, and there was a ram caught in the bushes. So Abraham's son Isaac grew, and Abraham wanted a wife for him. And so he sent his servant Eliezer to go find him a wife back in his home country. And his servant said to himself, "The woman who comes and waters my camels and me, that will be the one that I will know will be the wife for Isaac." We know that Rebekah came out and actually did that, watered his camels. Now, they'd been a long trip. Can you imagine how much water that was? And so we have Isaac and Rebekah, who had twin boys, Jacob and Esau. Okay, Jacob and Esau, Isaac and Rebekah. Something has all my dogs to barking. Probably an ambulance or some other siren going by. Okay. Every time that happens, it hurts their ears. So Jacob and Esau were very different. Jacob was a hunter. Jacob, let me start that over. Esau was a hunter. Jacob stayed inside the tents. He was an inside person. And Esau was out hunting and came back one day, and Jacob was cooking lentils. And Esau was so hungry, he wanted some. And Jacob said, "If you will give me your birthright, I will." He said, "What is it to me if I die?" So he foolishly traded his birthright for a pot of lentils. Now, Jacob further secured this deal by going into Isaac, dressed in Jacob's clothing. Isaac was old and blind at this time, and got Isaac to bless him. That made Isaac to bless Jacob instead of Esau. That made Esau so angry he wanted to kill his brother, and Jacob had to flee. Now, Jacob had and there's a lot that this does not cover in this scroll that are covered in other scrolls, but The scroll goes then to Joseph and his coat of many colors. And this is Jacob's favorite son through his wife Rachel. He had two wives. Leah was oldest sister of Rachel, and Leah had children. But Rachel's womb, well, she was barren, and Rachel finally had a son named Joseph. Rachel was very beautiful. Leah was described as having delicate eyes. We don't know exactly what that means. It means probably meant she was not as, well, definitely was not as pretty as Rachel. And he gave Joseph this coat. Jacob gave Joseph this coat of many colors as a gift. And he sent his son out to check on his other brothers. And here is a picture of this. And I'm trying to get the whole view in the screen. Where when he went, they hid him in a well. They were going to come back. They were first wanting to kill him. They instead sold him. This up here, I believe, is supposed to be the Ishmaelite traders. They instead sold their brother Joseph to that Ishmaelite trader. They sold him instead to the Ishmaelite traders. I'm trying to make this where we can see this large picture. Sold him to those Ishmaelite traders who took him to Egypt. They took Joseph to Egypt as a slave. They sold their own brother as a slave. So Joseph goes down to Egypt and is in the household of Potiphar. And Potiphar's wife cast longing eyes toward Joseph and told lies about him. And they put Joseph into prison. And in the prison, he interpreted the Pharaoh's dream. And I think I could see it better here. The dream. And his brothers went to Joseph, not knowing who he was, to buy food because there was a famine in the land. That, of course, was the dream Pharaoh had that Joseph interpreted. And I mean, this is a shortcut version of this. But they came to Egypt to buy food. And Joseph, of course, sold them the food. And they moved down to Egypt, to the land of Goshen. The land of Goshen. Here's a map of this area. I remember one thing, she liked to add maps here and there. I thought that was very interesting. And even as a professional teacher myself, how we're told to include geography whenever you can. And including geography, she did. She went all the way from the Black Sea, all the way down to the Suez Canal, Sinai, down in this area, and showing Egypt and the Promised Land, the Mediterranean. So here's all of that in a map that she drew. And Joseph's family got to come back. I didn't mention how they told Joseph's father that he was killed, dipped his coat in goat's blood, and told his father a wild beast has killed him. So here we come down to the time of Moses. They were in Egypt until a new king arose who did not know Joseph. Joseph saved Egypt because Joseph stored food. During the famine, they had food, and other countries came to buy food. And so Egypt became a wealthy nation. And during this time, we have the Israelites, the people Joseph made into slaves when a new king arose who did not know Joseph. And here's baby Moses. Moses in the Ark of Bulrushes. She would sing a song. Most of these stories, by the way, had a song to them. Okay, so please put the camera down so we can see a little bit better. The camera is not up. The camera is on my laptop. Is the way I'm doing this. I'm trying to back up and show this. let me see if I come up this way. Would that help any? Like I say, this is the first time I've ever even attempted this. So thank you. Who told me that? Shonda. Thank you, Shonda, for telling me that. Uh, so here is Moses, and she would sing the song, "Little baby Moses, a very goodly child, in an ark of rushes, a floating on the Nile." And big, I forgot how the rest of that went about the princess finding him, and big sister Miriam hiding in the reeds went and told the princess a Hebrew nurse she needs. And we know the story that she went and got Moses's mother, and Moses's mother raised him, and she got to teach him about God. Moses grew up to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. Again, this cuts next to Mount Sinai. Moses leading the children of Israel out of Egypt into Mount Sinai, getting the 10 Commandments. And here they are down here. I'm going to have to look at the front of this and see what she has written. Oh, she's written the plagues: blood, flies, frogs, bulls, hail, darkness, death of the firstborn, locusts, all of these things. She wrote something I can't read here. Oh, the cattle sick, locusts. Okay, so sometimes Granny would look down like this on them and see she could see down and she could read that upside down, but she would hold it like this, and you saw her. And she had such good facial expressions when she would imitate the voices of the Bible characters. I could not even begin to do it as well as she did. So, anyway, she has these written on there where she can read them. And Moses gave them the 10 Commandments from God, brought it down to them. They had made a golden calf, and Moses ground it up. This was one of our trivia questions. Ground it up and made them drink it. The children of Israel ate manna and quail. Manna and quail. Here are the quail that are on it. And the manna was on the ground. So here they are. And 40 years they wandered in the wilderness. I don't know why this may not be the Red Sea. This may be the Jordan River she's drawn for them to part, for them to go through. God parted the Jordan River as well as the Red Sea. I'm going to guess this was what this was. Every once in a while, I have found a few scenes out of sequence in the scrolls too. And she would just cover it and go back. After you've drawn it on these. And sometimes she would cut them out and stitch them together correctly. But either way, here we have Moses striking the rock to get water out of it when God told him to speak to the rock. This story hurt Granny more than any. She said, I just always felt sorry for Moses after going all that way. Then he let his anger get to him, and he got to see the promised land, but he didn't get to go into it. And she'd tell us, now God means what he says. And she would say, now you may run around here and act out and show out, but you're not going to do that for God. You're not going to do that and get by with God. But anyway, they went to the promised land, and here is a map of where each tribe settled in the promised land. And Joshua, that says Joshua. Joshua took Moses' place. Joshua took Moses' place. He was Moses' successor. And here we have the walls of Jericho and the battles that the Israelites fought for gaining the promised land. So this ends the scroll, and then what she would do, she'd lay it down and go to the next scroll, and after it, she'd sit there and she'd roll it up, or she'd get a kid to help her to roll it up. But I wanted to share that with you. I thought that would be something that we could all enjoy, all get something out of. Chastity, I forgot how colorful these were. Yes, they are very colorful. They were done with crayons. She tried this new stuff called liquid embroidery. She didn't like it. But I thought now what we would do is go to Adam. I want to go back to Adam, the first man. And Chastity, I'm helping her. I remember helping her roll the scrolls. Yeah, after a while, especially as she got older, she got somebody to help her do that. Now, I have a lesson on Adam that I want us to get our Bibles out, and I want us to look at. And Adam is what we would call a type. I'm going to use this word, type. And what I'm going to try to do, I have this lesson, how Adam is a type of Christ. Now, by type, it took me a long time to figure this out, actually, what we meant when someone was a type of something. Not type like you type on the computer, not type, but not actually type as in something like something. It wasn't something that like we may say that this horse or this animal is a type of horse. It's not even like that. We're talking about Adam being a type of Christ. Some people use the word archetype now, I believe is how that's pronounced. Means that he was a lot like Jesus in that he was a forerunner. He was a foreshadowing, perhaps we could say. He was something that was so much like Jesus, a type. He was a precursor, we may say today. I don't have an exact word to use for it, but I wanted us to look at how Adam is a type. He is a forerunner. He is a lot like Jesus Christ. In the Old Testament, we have to remember that all of this that we just looked at was God preparing the world for the Messiah. We start in Genesis when they ate of the fruit, where God promised Eve that from your seed or promised the devil rather, your seed and her seed, there will be enmity. And here we have in Genesis 3:15, he shall bruise thy head, you shall bruise his heel. We have here the first prophecy about Jesus Christ in Genesis 3:15. And the whole of the Bible is not just a history book. And when I say the word stories, we call them Bible story book. Some of our brethren today take offense at that. I take no offense at that because we use the word story to say something is true or not true. We say the word true story. Something's based on a true story. These are not stories in that we're comparing them to fairy tales or things like that. We're saying that they're stories in that they're something that happened. History has the word story in it. And so I urge you, don't take offense when someone says a Bible story. I always got when I was little, Bible story books. But in the Old Testament, God was preparing his people for Jesus. That's why we see this history of the world not just going into all countries, but narrowing down into one family. And that family is Abraham, and then his descendants. And even from his descendants, we see a narrowing down, skipping Esau and going through Jacob. And even out of all of Jacob's sons, we'll see some narrowing down in the New Testament to Jesus Christ. He made his people a great nation. He settled them into Canaan. And he sent prophets to them with the message about Jesus that was coming. And he tried to develop their knowledge through these types and foreshadows. And sometimes we'll see several characters in the Bible being a type or foreshadowing of Jesus. Adam is one. It was the writer of Hebrews who said that the law contained a shadow of good things to come. That's in Hebrews 10, verse 1. And there's a bunch of them, things, people, events that fall into this category of types. Moses is another one. He was a type of Christ. Some are easy to see, like Moses, some are more obscure. But I want to look at Adam. Paul revealed Adam to us as a type of Christ in Romans chapter 5, verse 14. We read, "Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned, after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him that was to come." So here's another word for type, a figure of him that was to come. So when something's a type of something else, there are always similarities between the two. When we compare the two, there's a striking likeness that exists between the type and then the person that they're foreshadowing is called the antitype. Now, I'm not going to take credit for this lesson. This is originally from Victor M. Eskew of the Oceanside Church of Christ in Florida. I believe it's Oceanside, Florida. I forgot the name of the town. But anyway, so we see Jesus and Adam being compared to each other, their comparison to them. And I want to look at the ways. First, Jesus and Adam are both called sons of God. Luke's genealogy in Luke 3, verse 38, refers to Adam as the son of God. Mary was told by the angel Gabriel that the child that she would bear would also be called the Son of God in Luke 1 and verse 35. And Adam was unique because he had no family background. He was created by God from the dust of the ground, no parents and all. And we read in Genesis 2, verse 7, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Well, just like this, Jesus became the Son of God in a unique way. Remember the virgin birth. Now, if we don't have any problem with God creating man out of the dust, we should have no problem with the virgin birth. Uh, so the prophet Isaiah said in Isaiah 7:14, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bring forth a son. They shall call his name Emmanuel," which being interpreted is God with us. And you can look and see this also in Matthew 1:23. So Adam and Jesus, the first thing I want to compare those two to each other is that they are both the sons of God in very unique ways. Well, another thing is that Adam and Jesus also both bear the image of God the Father. When he was about to create man, God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." That's Genesis 1:26. So, in verse 27, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them." So being made in the image of God is what set man apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. From the animal kingdom, we have many similarities with the animals, but none of them, we are told, were made in the image of God. We are told that Adam was made in the image of God. Man possessed and still does self-consciousness, free will, a conscience. He could love, he could communicate, he could have intimate relationship with God, he could have intimate relationships with other human beings. And Jesus, the same way, bears the image of God. He does so in absolute perfection. The writer of Hebrews describes him as the express image of his person, Hebrews 1, verse 3. And other passages make this claim as well. But Jesus so completely resembles the Father that to see him is to see the Father. During his earthly time here, one of his disciples said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us, John 14:8. And Jesus said this, have I been so long time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He that has seen me hath seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, show us the Father? John 14, verse 9. So with this concept in mind, we're to imitate Jesus Christ. 1 John 2, verse 6 tells us that. John said that. Peter said that in 1 Peter 2 and 21. And when we imitate Jesus, then we're becoming like God. We're becoming God-like, the term godly. And so not only were Adam and Jesus sons of God, but they both bore the image of God. A third way that they were alike was that Adam and Christ were invested with power and with dominion. Adam's power was over the earth and over the animal kingdom. And after creating Adam and Eve, we read that God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Genesis 1, verse 28. Oh, this concept was known, it was appreciated by King David in Psalm 8, verses 6 through 8. David wrote, thou madest him, that's man, to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, yea, and the beast of the field, the fowl of the air, and the fish of the sea, and whatsoever passes through the paths of the sea. And so this thought was one of the things that caused David to exclaim, O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. Psalm 8, verse 9. So man was given that power. We have to be careful with that power, not abuse that power. We have to be careful and save this earth, not destroy it. As it is put under us, we have responsibilities to it. And hope as Christians that we're doing that as well. But Jesus too had dominion, had power. We read that Jesus' power was not limited to this earth. We read Matthew 28, verse 18, where Jesus said, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Paul declared this when he said, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions, and or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. That is Colossians 1, 16 through 17. I'm sorry, Colossians 1, 16 through 18. Colossians 1, 16 through 18. Now, another way that the two can be compared and be similar. A fourth, Adam and Jesus brought something to man. Perhaps it might be better to say that both of them committed acts that have a tremendous impact on humans. Romans 5, verse 18 through 19 reveals each of their actions and the consequences thereof to man. And we read, therefore, as by the offense of one judgment came upon all men to condemnation, even so by the righteousness of one, the free gift came upon all men unto justification of life. For as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous. Well, what is it talking about? Adam's sin. He introduced sin to this world. He brought death to this world. He brought condemnation to this world. And while we are not responsible for Adam's sin, that's another subject in itself. The fact is that the consequences of Adam's sins fall upon us. If somebody harms their body, and it's say if this somebody is a mother, while she is expecting, she harms her body. The consequence of that sin, naturally, is something that the child has to endure too. We have to remember that our sins may have consequences that go beyond our generation. Our good things do too, in a way. If someone works hard and provides for their family well, when their children are born into that family, they, father and mother, they receive the blessings of it as well. On the other hand, if someone does not do that, then the children are born and receive consequences, not the punishment of the sin, but definitely the consequences of a sin or of all of our actions. We have to remember that. We see, though, that Jesus did the opposite. Jesus died and he brought forgiveness. He brought life. He brought the reward of heaven to man. We read in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and down in verses 21 to 22. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. So Adam and Jesus brought something to the human world, to all of God's creation. So not only were they sons of God, not only did they bear the image of God, not only were they invested with power and dominion, but they brought something to man. And the last thing I want to say that they compare with each other is look at the brides of Adam and Jesus Christ. Now, Eve was Adam's bride in Genesis 2, verses 18 through 24. God, after he made Eve, brought her to man. Man called her woman. And there, in essence, you have the first wedding ceremony. The bride of Christ is the church. That church is precious to him. He shed his blood for it. Acts 20, verse 28. In fact, there are several verses that say this, not just Acts 20 and 28. Paul said it to the Romans in Romans 7 and verse 4. This is the bride. This is the bride of Christ. But let me not stop there. 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 2. For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy. For I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. Ephesians 5, verse 22, following, we have the comparison between Christ and the church, and the wife and the husband. And this is Ephesians 5:22 all the way down to verse 33. Revelation 21, verse 2, John saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. We have to remember that the bride adorned for her husband is one of the most beautiful days in a woman's life, as in even the physical beauty of how she is adorned. In every culture, just about, you see there's something special that somebody wears when they get married. In our culture, it's the gown, the lacy white gown. And in other cultures, we have other beautiful things worn. A Japanese wedding, in my opinion, is very beautiful as well. But a bride adorned for her husband, and that's the way we should be. Let me say this: Romans 7:4, that wherefore, my brethren, ye also are become dead to the law by the body of Christ, that ye should be married to one another, even to him who is raised from the dead, that we should bring forth fruit unto God. What do you mean we're married to Jesus? Well, we're his bride. We are his bride. And I also mentioned Acts 20 and verse 28, that he purchased this church with his own blood. I'm not going to get away from Adam. Jacob worked 14 years for Rachel, and in that way was allowed to marry her. We could say he purchased her. He really didn't, by buying something enslaved or something. That wasn't the idea. It was the debt he worked off to marry her, although such was similar in that day and time. But Jesus purchased the church in that way. He worked for it, gave his life for it. And so looking at Adam, we see Adam's bride and Jesus has a bride too. Adam's bride was Eve. Jesus's bride is the church. And this is the group of the saved. This is the group we want you to be in. So having said that, that concludes my lesson uh, tonight. I'm going to do some rearranging on my screen where I can see everybody better. Uh, we have here Cookie says the Jordan River, I bet, after the manna and quail. Yeah. Enjoyed this so much. Thank you. Absolutely. I enjoyed doing it. I hope you got to see it well. What you need, I think, when somebody, if I ever do something like that again, maybe we need someone filming it with a phone or a camera where they can get you and zoom in and they can see uh, the whole thing. And like I say, I cannot make them come alive just like she did. But you know, you can take these incidents, these stories in the Bible, tell them to your children, let them know what they are. I would like to do some character studies as we did tonight with Adam. I'd like to go through and do some more. I did with our teenagers several character studies of Genesis and Exodus. I did a brief overview of just about that time span because I want our young people. I know Rachel's here, and those who went through that class. I don't want to just right now go right back into that because we did. I'd like to take from there and go on and do some more character studies. But I want to say thank you to everybody for coming in and joining us, and thank you everybody. Chastity says thank you so much. I loved it. I had so many memories come back. I will say, and Aaron is too. Good. I'm glad to see that Aaron is with us. Aaron Kellum. I know we have an Aaron and an Aaron with Aaron Kellum and Aaron Ellenberg. I hope she's watching us too. I imagine she would be. But it's so good to be here with everybody and to do this with you. And next Wednesday, we hope to be back at 6 o'clock. So, everybody have a good evening. Stay safe. Keep everybody we mention in our prayer list on your prayers. And I do hope to see you again. As far as we know now, the homecoming festivities, the homecoming festivities, the eating together, the assemblage at the building, that cannot take place. We will meet here online, and I hope to do something special to us all for a homecoming for Dovertown online. I'm going to see what I can cook up and get here. It's just a different time period. Keep my family in your prayers, please. And I cannot think of anything else, so I'm going to say to everybody, have a good evening. Chastity said, love y'all. Love you too, and every one of you. May God bless you richly. Have a good night.